And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. I'm delighted to have a guest that you all will know from the work she's done medically and how she was caught up in what happened on Capitol Hill as a J6er, and that is Dr. Simone Gold. Dr. Gold, I really appreciate your time joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me, Peter.
Great, and so much to discuss. And obviously, they're all your handles, Dr. Simone Gold on X. We'll get into the American frontline doctors and your work on that. And obviously, Gold Care will end off on that, which is phenomenal and so needed. And you'll talk about it from a US perspective. I will tell you we need a goldcare.co.uk. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation from the UK. But you're a doctor, lawyer, and a warrior, and facing 60 days inside prison and fighting for freedom, the CEO of Gold Care, and also founder and president of America's Frontline Doctors. Your first book in 2020 was I Do Not Consent, My Fight Against Medical Cancel Culture, and the latest one, Selective Persecution, the Legalization of America's Fascism. And you don't hold back on the title. Let me bring it up on the screen. All the links are in the description. Make sure and get a hold of it. And any book that has a foreword by Dennis Prager and ends off with Dr. Robert Malone is certainly well worth getting hold of. But maybe, Dr. Gold, I can ask you first, whenever you wrote I Do Not Consent, I guess you weren't expecting the next couple of years to turn out as they have.
Oh my gosh, no. Sometimes people ask me, did I plan all this? And said, absolutely not. You can't plan it. As it was unfolding, I didn't know how serious and deep the problems were with censorship and propaganda. I just knew that the doctors were being silenced. And then, of course, you peel back the layers and it's everywhere in America. I know it's worse in the UK. I do keep up a bit on that, and it's horrific. And we're not going there. We're not going there.
No, it's not good. But let me jump in, and I would encourage the viewers and listeners to get a hold of the book. Maybe Simone will do an audio version sometime. Have you thought of sitting in the audio booth?
As a matter of fact, I have completed the audio version. It's just not online yet, so it should be days away, really.
Oh, well,
Yes.
we're recording this a few days before it goes out, so we'll see if it is available then. And I always, never having written a book, and certainly never having done an audiobook, it must be strange as an author reliving the whole experience.
Oh, you know what? I didn't hire somebody to do the audio because I'm like, you just got to do it yourself. And
Yeah.
it was wild, actually, just reading it. This book took 2.5 years to write because there's a lot of research in that. That doesn't mean it's boring. What I mean by research is I brought the receipts. As a lot of people in 2025 that want to pretend they didn't say or do things that they did. So, Anthony Fauci is a big one, but there's a lot of politicians, there's a lot of newscasters and celebrities who said horrific things and still haven't apologized, still haven't walked it back. And so I have all those receipts in the book. And as I was reading it, it was very kind of interesting to me. We're in 2025 now, and we can't forget. We can move past it, but to move past it, people have to acknowledge what they've done. And we have not had that. We have not had that. So I think if you're interested in COVID, what went wrong during COVID, and if you're interested in, obviously, if you're interested in J6 in particular, like what happened that day, unless you're very, very, very educated, unless you, for example, know somebody who was personally arrested, you don't really know what happened on J6. So this book kind of introduces you into what happened. And it also is a bit shocking that a person like myself, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a mom, completely stellar reputation, really was put in prison by my own government. And how did that happen in America? So this book goes chapter by chapter, like how that happened. And it's why I say there's an infrastructure for fascism in America, because it's not simply that people were wanting to target people like me. There had to be an infrastructure to allow them to do that, right? The cops had to go along with it, and the Department of Justice had to be on board, and the judges had to be on board, and the academic institutions. And why did doctors lose their board certification? Because the state medical boards were on board with this. That's what I mean by the infrastructure.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
Yeah, and there's so much. I mean, Dennis Prager starting off talking about those SWAT raids on non-violent offenders, imprisonment for misdemeanors, solitary confinement without a cause, and 100% conviction rate. And you talk about that. It's a fascinating start. But then in the introduction, you say obviously you recount back in 2020 when you had that White Coat Summit, and then that led to being invited to speak at this event because that was so popular. I mean, 20 million views in less than a day, and it shows there was hunger for that. Then you went along to this event. Tell us a little bit about just the day. You go through it and you explain it, but getting invited just to speak from a health point of view seems a normal, positive thing to do. Certainly not political in any way.
Yeah, the reason my story is so important is if you want to believe that the government was just targeting political dissidents, for example, then how do you explain my story? Because I was actually there talking about health and medical freedom. Yes, it was portrayed as being on one side politically, but I know it really is not political. I was talking about medical freedom and people's ability to take care of themselves and live longer and live healthier, right? So that's in and of itself a very eye-opening moment. Like, it wasn't just filled with people who were protesting the election. It was filled also with people who had something to say. So yes, it was actually a really big honor to be invited. And I'm not sure I said it in the book. It's been a while since I wrote that chapter. But I was very honored because I was sitting in the third row as the president was speaking. That was just incredible. And, I was there the whole morning. It was really, really cold. And when it was time to walk over to where I was due to speak with a government issued permit, had permission to be on the Capitol grounds along with 4 congresspeople. When we walked over, that's kind of when everything unfolded around me. But the reason I'm so concerned for America is I believed we had lived in a country where you were judged by your own actions. If I was being judged by my own actions, of course there would have been no arrest. It's ridiculous. I was standing there. I was talking about medical freedom. I mean, right? So how did we arrive at a place in America where we could arrest someone like me? And there were others that were just as innocent as I was. In fact, most of us. But I just think I'm a real outlier because I was actually not even talking about the election or politics.
No, and I know. And I think the chapter 1, a line, I don't know if it was in it or just as I was reading it, was from kind of compassion to cruelty. And I think one of the quotes from the chapter is, what does it do to a nurse, to a doctor, to a nation when compassionate professionals are forced by their employer to be cruel? And that is a question that is still reverberating through the US and worldwide.
Peter, I'm so glad you pulled out that. I'm so glad. So I am in a unique position to see the similarities between what happened in COVID and the hospital systems, for example, and in my case, in the prison system. And I know that sounds unrelated to people, but you're wrong. It's highly related. So in 2020, up until 2020, doctors and nurses really just cared for patients. Some doctors and nurses are better than others, but I would say they all were working for the patient's benefit. In my entire career, I'd never heard or seen of a situation where the doctor or the doctor or the nurse was not working for the patient's benefit. In 2020, the hospital CEOs were coming up with policies that were bad for the patients. They were saying that the staff had to be all covered up, so the patient is already scared, and then they're seeing the staff all covered up like an astronaut. They were saying that family members couldn't come in. I mean, it was lunacy from start to finish. They were saying that you had to give drugs that were lethal, remdesivir, and not give drugs that are safe and effective like ivermectin. So I labeled this casual cruelty because we started instituting a world in the hospitals where people were being told they had to be cruel, and they were being told this by their employers, and they either had to keep their paycheck or be cruel. I mean, they had to keep their paycheck, they had to be cruel, or then they had to quit. Like, those were the only options available to people. Most people are not going to quit their job or their career. They just got too many pressing financial issues, right? So slowly, the nurses were taught to be cruel. That's it. The nurses were taught to be cruel. And I liken this to the prison system, because look at our federal prison system. We have more people per capita in prison than any other nation. And I am telling you as an insider that we have taught everyone in the prison bureaucracy to be very cruel. Now, in your mind, you may think if you're in prison, you deserve to be in prison. First of all, not everyone in prison is that guilty. When you read the book, you will understand why I say that. But even if they were, the point of prison is that you should walk out and be a functioning member of society. It doesn't help achieve that goal if you're only dealing with sadistic prison guards in that frame. So I'm cautioning everyone that if we allow this casual cruelty to permeate, we allowed it in the prison system. We didn't care because those are, quote, prisoners and criminals. But we saw that by allowing that at that level, we were kind of open to it. And we allowed it in the hospitals when the elite people said, be cruel. And I'm urging people to reject casual cruelty in their own life, in their own daily job. It's incredibly important.
No, it is.
That
And
makes sense.
no, absolutely. And we've all got I think, a different view of different professional organizations and institutions than we had prior, and especially on the health side. And that's why we'll get on to Gold Care near the end. I think it's absolutely essential with that mistrust that the public now have. But there are a lot Chapter 3, Dirty Cops, and you talk about waking up in your Los Angeles home to the sound of the door being battered down by a ram full by 20 heavily armed FB SWAT agents, shouting orders, training red lasers with rifles at your body. There's no way you can explain what that is like, I guess, to someone who's never been through it. But you just read that chapter and you can feel the fear, the concern. You put yourself in that position and you think, holy crap, what would lead anyone to come at a doctor like that?
Right. So, and this is the reason I wrote the book, is because there are more normal, healthy, right-thinking people in America than the opposite. But the problem is that the people at the top tend to be kind of the opposite. And I'm writing this to the nurse, the cop, the teacher, the mom, the mid-level manager, the marketing guy. You guys are America. And when you're being told to do something that your intuition is like, this isn't right, you actually need to not do it. So you had these FBI agents, presumably basically good people. They certainly didn't go into law enforcement to target someone like me. They came very close to shooting me dead. It took me a year, I think, to process that I was very close. I tried to capture it in the book. I'm not sure I really did. But I've often thought the cop who had his finger on the trigger, there was many of them, but there were two that were very, very, they were like 3 feet from me. And I'm looking at the laser sight bead on my chest, but I can see the sweat on his upper lip. And so he's been hyped up on adrenaline. He's been told this is a violent person, because why else would he be on a SWAT tactical arrest force other than for someone violent? So adrenaline is coursing through his veins. And mistakenly, in my confusion, I took a half a step forward when he told me not to do that. So if he had shot me dead, I think he would have been judged justifiable homicide, right? The resisting or something. But what would happen to him? Right? So he kills me. He then, of course, finds out I'm a doctor, a lawyer, a mom, completely law-abiding. That destroys a person. That's going to be terrible for him as well. So I'm urging everyone that it isn't good for you and your soul to do things that are in conflict with what you know is right. And I had a pretty serious conversation with the young FBI agent who ended up driving me to prison, because he was about 25. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're training 25-year-olds to think this is normal. And it was up to me to tell him, no, this is not normal. And I said to him, do you know even why I'm being arrested? He didn't really know. I said, well, one day when you're older, you will face a moment to do one of two choices. I said, I was a doctor in the ER. There was a patient in front of me. They needed medicine. I prescribed the medicine. And everything that's happened to me since is downstream from that. I said, so you will have that moment in your own life. And what you do in that moment matters. And so I'm sharing it with you, and I share it with the media, and I want everyone to share it with everybody else. In that moment of truth, you have to do the right thing. And there's more. What was that movie where there was so many, there were ants and grasshoppers, and there were just so many ants, and they finally took over? I don't know. but the grasshoppers were kind of oppressing the ants, but it turned out there were so many more ants than grasshoppers. There's so many more good, healthy, normal people that we need to assert ourselves.
You and again in that chapter you go deeper, and it's or it might be the fourth chapter. I mean, guilty until proven guilty. That's a great line, and turns upside down our whole legal system, our understanding of what it means to be a law-abiding citizen. Maybe caught up in this, but you talk about how your property was held, your phone, your laptop, for over a year, and obviously that restricted you from your work with America's frontline doctors. Maybe that was why you were also regarded as a threat, that you were speaking something different to the narrative. Then you had your weekly check-ins, travel restrictions. I mean, it seemed as though the process was also part of the punishment.
Yeah, whoever coined that phrase is exactly right. I have been going through legal processes on this issue for more than 3 years, probably 4 years. And first of all, it bankrupts the normal person, right? I was in a better position than 99% of people this happened to, but financially, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, it also bankrupts your time. It ends up, dominating your day. If you have 8 to 10 hours a day you can work, and 6 of them are spent on the legal, right? So this is really how they take people out. There was no question they targeted me. They came after me very, very fast. Like apparently my indictment was like that day or a day or two later from January 6th. I mean, it was super fast. But then the process that you go through, and the reason I said guilty until proven guilty is because 100% of J6ers were found guilty. They did this on purpose because they didn't want to go through trials and discovery. So they put very heavy charges on us that they shouldn't have done. So they got people to take a plea. I was in that category. I want to share with people who know me or follow me. I had not planned to take a plea. Many people have written to me and said they were sad I took a plea. I said, if they charged me with trespass, I was going to go to trial, right? When you look at the big picture, I wasn't guilty of that either, but I would have gone to trial on that. But that's not what they did. They charged me with a 20-year felony, which was completely fabricated. Completely. There's a whole chapter I wrote on that, and the Supreme Court reversed it, but people were already at that point in prison for 3 years by the time they reversed it. So yes, the process is definitely the punishment.
Well, there was one, I can't find the quote, but there was one line where you talked about having a gun against your head, which is a 20-year prison sentence. And that does mean you're forced to make a decision. You don't have a choice any longer in that situation.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to think, you're sitting there smug on your couch and like, oh, it's not being forced. Yeah, it's being forced. Think about it. You're being charged with a 20-year felony. In my particular case, also, I have a law license and a medical license I have to protect. I've worked my whole career for, and you're going to threaten those. If I take a felony, if I get convicted of a felony, no, I lose that. And the other real big problem was we were not being tried in any normal courtroom. All of us were being tried in the District of Columbia. Now, I'm a lawyer. Let's look at that carefully. You change jurisdiction when a crime occurred in an area and the people understand you can't judge it objectively. So like Oklahoma bombing, there's big famous cases that you have to move because the people are so emotionally invested in the situation. So obviously, people were so emotionally invested, especially in the District of Columbia. Yes, the J6 narrative dominated the whole world, the whole country, but the people that lived in District of Columbia, it was actually more personal to them. And it's very much what we call a company town. I think about 30% of people who are employed in DC actually work for the federal government. So this is the definition of a company town. So we knew we were not getting a fair shot. How do you go up against a rigged system where you're going to get convicted when there's a 20-year felony? I'm sorry, it's kind of like a Stalin-esque kind of court.
No, it is. And tell us a little bit, Chapter 8, dirty lawyers, and then you go into Chapter 9 looking at the whole propaganda when everyone, big tech, the media, they're all against you, labeling you a quack, trying to destroy you personally, reputationally, emotionally. All that is against. What was that like? Was there any legal way that you could push back, or is it the whole onslaught of the system just pushing you down?
Yeah, so you can see from having read the book that I fight very hard. But there were some things that were just so concretized in our system, which is why the subtitle is The Infrastructure to Tyranny, like it's already here. So, for example, the prosecutors, U.S. prosecutors lied. I had no idea as a lawyer that U.S. prosecutors lie. They lied routinely. I have absolute proof. I put many examples in the book. April Aguirre Perez, the assistant U.S. attorney, she's just like a low-level prosecutor. She lied constantly. It was amazing. Jason Manning, they lied. I'm saying this out loud, right? Come sue me for defamation. I welcome that. Okay? So I name names in the book. So it's very understood within the system that prosecutors lie. It was also true that judges were incredibly prejudiced against this J6 group. You have had judges who had murderers in their courtroom that they didn't hate nearly as much as they hated J6ers. It was crazy. You had judges say things like, this is an insurrection. It's not about me, but about other people. Now, a judge is supposed to be unbiased. I mean, it was really outrageous. The judges, that's corrupt. A judge is supposed to be unbiased. That is the definition. So the judges were corrupt. The prosecutors were lying. It was bewildering that this was our nation. So I've learned that our criminal system, which is supposed to be to find, to separate the innocent from guilty, and then the guilty have a punishment, right? That's supposed to be the system. But in fact, the prosecutors define it as win-lose, 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 like a Super Bowl game. That's not the prosecutor's role. The prosecutor actually works for society. So there is no societal benefit to putting away innocent people, none at all. So everyone who's arrested is not guilty. If that was true, then all the cops on the ground would have all the evidence at the time, right? So we know obviously not 100% of people who are arrested are guilty. Then why is the conviction rate like 96%? Once you get to a conviction rate of 96%, everyone looking at that is like, I'll just take a plea. So that's the system. And I think the solution is for prosecutors to understand and re-understand that their job is not win-lose, win-lose. The defense attorney's job is win-lose, right? He's got the one guy he's got to fight for, right? He has to do it legally. He can't lie. He can't suborn perjury. But he is fighting hard for that one guy. He's on a win-lose trajectory. But the prosecutor's not supposed to be on a win-lose trajectory. If they see evidence the guy is innocent, they're supposed to want to let that person go. And they never do.
And even if there are pardons later on, the system has still won. People don't come out of prison and necessarily just pick up. You had an organization, you were high profile, but many of the J6ers were not high profile at all. They can't just pick up, and financially, emotionally, they've really been severely damaged and maybe destroyed, and family relationships, all of that have been obliterated.
Yes, 100%. People lost businesses, people lost homes, people got divorced. Many, not many, but enough, more than one, have committed suicide. It's outrageous, the punishment. The administration has to make reparations for the fact that our federal government targeted us. I compare it, and I think it's worse, actually, than what we did in the 40s to the Japanese Americans when we interned them. They got compensation, but it was very late. It was like a generation later, like 30 years later, or maybe longer, 40 years. That is not what has to happen. We have to acknowledge this. We have to look in the mirror. We have to say federal government did wrong. And that, it's very dangerous to the ordinary American to have the federal government target you. I'll give you just a small example. I was applying for a medical license in another state. And the question is, have I ever been arrested? And I remember saying, I don't know how I answer that, because once I got pardoned, it's wiping the slate clean. But the lawyer said to me, listen, the board that's asking this may think you're dishonest for not saying you were arrested. So it cannot completely reverse it. It does legally. Legally, I should be able to say no. It's supposed to wipe it back. But I believe if I said no, that I would be denied the medical license. And I believe by saying yes, the whole license application will be delayed or maybe denied. So no, the harms are permanent. And that's just a small example.
Wow. There was a quote stood out to me, Chapter 7, Selective Persecution, and the quote was, the consequences of unchecked government brutality is not just prison, it is the quiet extinguishing of a citizen's life. And I guess that's not just the legal process, but actually spending time in a prison cell, finding yourself in a place that you never expected and had no intention, knowing you haven't ever broken the law. Tell us about that, in actually being sentenced to those 60 days and ending up in not just an open prison that we would call the UK, but what do you call it? A hardcore prison? Or, how do you term it?
So in America, it goes maximum, medium, low security, and then the minimum camp. Obviously, someone like me goes to a minimum camp. They have point scoring on the lowest of the low. Obviously, that's where you would send me. No, they sent me to a hardcore camp. It's the equivalent of a maximum. It's called an administrative. It's still unclear how that happened, but to all J6ers, they put us all at a higher level. We all, virtually all of us, I can't say all, but over 98% of J6 convictions should have gone to a minimum. Okay, so they put me in a hardcore place. Hardcore. And, thank God I'm female. I mean, hardcore is, I'm sure, worse on the male side, but it was terrible. There you go. It was terrible. And I didn't belong there. Yeah.
Tell us about getting out, getting released. And of course, you weren't vindicated when you were released. It was just the end of the time, your punishment. But you end up being released. What kind of were the steps? What steps did you take after actually getting out, after serving 2 months in jail? You have to try and pick your life up again, put those pieces back together. And what were the kind of few months like after being released?
I think it's very important when you go into prison to be prepared and to have a plan. I now am very sympathetic to people going to prison. I almost don't care why they're going to prison. I just want them to be successful in prison, which means, get something accomplished. And then so when you leave, you're in a better place, because it really crushes the soul to do nothing. The thing about prison that's the worst is the feeling that you're just missing your life. So I actually went in with a plan. I kept myself busy. One of the things I did was I interviewed all the women. That happens to be my personal favorite chapter in the book, which is like, what do these women do that they're in a hardcore maximum prison? It will shock you to see the level of mundaneness that got people 10 years, right? So one is I kept myself very occupied. Two, it was helpful that I knew it was 60 days. It's a concrete amount of time that I'd be out. So honestly, the moment I got out, I took one weekend off, which I never do, and I hit the ground running on the Monday. They let me out on a Friday. I took a weekend off. I spent in Miami hotel. I had some good food. I don't know if you saw me when I got out of prison. I had prison braids. It was fabulous.
I remember.
And then Monday morning, I was back at work.
I'd say that. The line I was looking for is in chapter 11. It says, when there's a loaded gun held to your head, you cannot exercise free will. A 20-year felony is a loaded gun. And you've touched on that. But yeah, you don't have the freedom to choose. You're forced to do one thing, or the rest is your life disappears in a 20-year prison sentence. And I'm sure there are many other people who have that threat and have to make a decision, plead guilty, and the damage it does to their life and is horrendous. So you talk about prison, the daily routine, getting out. Now, if I can get on to what you're doing in terms of health-wise, because I'll let viewers and listeners get hold of the book, and maybe by the time this comes out, the audiobook will be out. If not, it'll be out very, very soon. And I always respect an author for sitting down and doing that themselves and writing it twice, in effect, because they go through it again. But tell us a little bit about Gold Care. And you've set up a product that is affordable and accessible to everyone. Why is it needed, and what does it offer?
Thank you for the question. So first of all, I grew up as a daughter of a doctor, and I was trained and believed that being a doctor was the best thing you could do with your life. I'm not joking. It was better than being president of the United States. It's just, if I'm Jewish, and there's something called pikuah nefesh, which is to save a life is as though you save a world. So that was my orientation growing up. That was my orientation as a doctor. And it's still my orientation, that the individual in front of me is a whole world. You have to help that person. So I knew that our system was quite dysfunctional, but I never believed that doctors and nurses would work against patients. It's not something I could have processed. Okay, so the mask came off in COVID, and I absolutely know for certain that I would say the majority of doctors and nurses don't put the patient first. Now, that's going to sound very shocking and dramatic and maybe conspiratorial to people. It's not. You can get good care, but it's not the purpose of the system. The purpose of the system is to sell you stuff and to do stuff. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. So when you need it, when your needs completely coincide with the selling of stuff, things can work out great. You need a hip replacement, it works out great. Okay. But the average ordinary stuff is built to sell you prescriptions. It's built to do tests. It's built, to follow government mandates. That needs to stop, because people were so afraid during COVID that they gave up their freedom, right? There was a lot of people that would not have complied, Peter, if they just had any source of information. There were people I know because I met them for years. They knew, they're like, oh, Dr. Gold, I knew something was wrong, but like nobody was saying it. I just didn't trust myself. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But like, I just knew it was wrong. Those people need an accurate source of information, and then that needs to spread. So my vision was always to provide that accurate information to everybody. Now that's expensive, right? You can't give everybody, free medical care, despite what the Democrats in America want to tell people. It's not a thing, right? Nothing in life is free. We left the Garden of Eden a long time ago. So, but what can be very inexpensive is access to unbiased, solid information. So when you come and join Gold Care, and by the way, you can join from the UK. I had to tell you that.
Oh.
I know. You're going to like your
I will.
And the way it works is this. You spend $10 a month or $100 for the year, and you get access to two things. You get all the wellness side, which is educations and videos and classes, and we do that all week, and then on demand. And then sometimes you need a doctor, and you can make a doctor appointment, and that is pay as you go. And we've already vetted the doctors to be unbiased. They're not paid by big pharma. They're not paid by corporations, and it's quite affordable, right? So $10 a month, you can't get any cheaper than that to get access to the system. About half of our members haven't even made a doctor appointment. They're just so happy with the content. The other half have made appointments and they love it. We get like amazing internal reviews. We don't post it publicly. But if you need to see a doctor for blood pressure or lipid problem, or, do I have diabetes or I need to lose weight, right? We got you all covered. Same as any other doctor. So I urge everyone across the world to come. Goldcare.com. It's on the App Store, internet. And again, we built it so you're empowered. For example, you're podcasting, right? So when the measles outbreak happened in America, you probably did a podcast on that, right? They're talking about bird flu. They're talking about, disease X. What do you believe? People are like, what do I believe, Dr. Gold? I'm like, come to Gold Care. We'll educate you. Next week, or maybe when this podcast runs on September 17th in the evening, September 17th, Wednesday night, we're doing our monthly town hall, which is open to everybody. And we're talking about mental health and mental illness, right? The transgender shooter, why are teenagers on so many antidepressants? This is free to the public. We want you to know. We don't want you to live in fear. Goldcare.com, come join us. It's like a revolution.
So people join, and I will when we finish this. So by the time this goes out, I will have joined, and people can join those monthly seminars, but also get the health. Because I think a lot of people, the last place you now want to be is a doctor's surgery. That is really the last place you want to be.
I want to tell you how it is in the UK, because I know you must have a lot of UK listeners. So I really want everyone in the UK who's hearing my voice to join. Here's why. Okay, $10 a month, and what you get is information that's going to save your life when you go to your government doctor, right? You got your government insurance, government care, right? And half the time, from what I hear, what they're telling you isn't exactly the best advice. Sometimes it's terrible advice. Sometimes it's just not the best advice. Could you imagine if you have a Gold Care appointment, you get all educated on what you need to know. Then you go in to your government doctor as an educated consumer. So for people in the UK, of course you need to join us, because then you go in as a savvy consumer for a very low price. Normally, you'd have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to find doctors that I've picked. That's the truth. And now you can do it for a very low price, and then you can go armed in your life and make great decisions.
And you can also pay $50 or whatever and have the consultation. So there's all different things available. I think the line that's really caught me during the COVID tyranny is, and it's a meme, that is a patient cured is a customer lost. And I think that sums up it's in the US especially. With us, we just wait on a waiting list for a year in the UK.
Right. So
in
the UK
US,
does it differently.
Yeah.
In America, they're just selling. And in UK, they're just kind of killing and letting them go. In Canada, they're actively killing. And in the UK, they just let them die, in my opinion. And in America, they just medicate us, over-medicate us, because they're selling us things. So the three top best-selling categories of pharmaceuticals in America are the lipids, the anti-statin drugs, the statin anti-lipid drugs, the hypertensive drugs, and the antidepressants, right? And when you look and you drill down to the science on all of them, you can probably get off them. So we work to deprescribe. We don't do anything recklessly. We're all doctors, but we do it carefully. But I can't tell you how many people we've had that have been on Lipitor for 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, and we take them off, right? We assess. It's not 100%, but it's It's quite close to 100%. The antidepressants, would it shock you to know that Prozac is about as helpful for depression as taking a 30-minute walk every day? People on Prozac, those types of drugs, they don't know those facts. Those facts are out there. It's not that we're inventing the fact. It's not that we've read the science and the research and we're not bought by big pharma. So we just tell you the truth. We're like, okay, well, there's Prozac and it's like taking a walk every day. And there's all these other side effects. So maybe you just rather take a walk every day.
I think that, I saw some of the figures on drugs and the costs of them. And really, it's down to diet and exercise. And it was amazing. And I think you had it in the US as well. Come and get your COVID shot and get a donut. That's really not going to help you health wise. And I think diabetes, I read somewhere that the US spent something like 200 billion or some
We
crazy
are,
amount on diabetes.
we are so, and the truth is, it's just culture in general all over the world has gotten very woke. But in the medical space, the problem is it started about 15 years ago. Doctors really kind of just stopped telling people they were overweight. What they started telling them instead, this is going to shock people, you're pre-diabetic. So if you're hearing my voice and you've had a doctor say to you, oh, you're pre-diabetic, you probably think you have some like disease that the doctor said. No, that was the doctor afraid to tell you that you need to lose some weight. Almost always that's what it was. Because if you lose weight, you clean up your diet, you move your body every day, that prediabetes almost always will resolve. So why can't the doctor just tell you that? Instead, they're like, oh, prediabetes, right? Because the doctor doesn't want to hurt your feelings, doesn't want to, right? But how does that help you as the patient? And I take being a doctor seriously. Like my job, and God's going to judge me, is I have to help the person in front of me. It doesn't help you to tell you prediabetes, take this pill. It helps you to tell you if you lost 20 pounds and you took a walk every day, you probably are going to be okay. But there's no money in that.
No, there's no money. So again, the links are in the description, goldcare.com. Last question, and then I want to just mention an event you have coming up. Again, from a UK point of view, we hear a lot about the insurance industry, which is how the healthcare system in the US works or doesn't work. And no criticism at all, because we've got a messed up system here in the UK. But is there pushback in terms of the insurance industry that doesn't want to get you well, wants to prescribe as many drugs as possible because that's where the money is, and it's not
Right.
about healthcare, it's about keeping you, I guess, hooked on drugs?
Right. It's a great question, but I want your audience and you to understand there is no external answer. It is about you making better decisions, and goldcare.com is the only business that I know of that can do that for you for a low price. You in your own life have to not take all the prescription meds that the doctor recommends just because they recommend them. You need to seek out information. Do I need this? Are there alternatives? Like, what should I do? Sometimes you do, like thyroid, right? You probably, if you have poor thyroid function, you almost certainly need prescription thyroid medicine. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you need to take charge. You need to stop outsourcing it to some person in a white coat, right? We learned we can't really outsource teaching, they're teaching our kids all kinds of things, right? So you really can't outsource what's best for your health. That's number one. And I just want to say, and it was kind of you not to bash the American healthcare system, knowing that your own is terrible. Here's what I'm going to say. They're both awful. Of the two, America's still better for the following reasons. You can opt out and should of the insurance model in America. You cannot in the UK. The problem is people have been so propagandized, they don't realize they can opt out. Another reason to come to Gold Care is if you're American, we will teach you how to get off the insurance model. I want to shock everybody. I have not had health insurance more than 10 years. And I say that to shock everybody because people can't believe it. Am I being financially responsible to myself and my family? Absolutely. I have a financial safety net. I explain it to you at Gold Care. The problem in the UK is you got the one system. In America, you can opt out of the insurance model, you can financially protect yourself, and you can get the answers. What I can do for the people in Great Britain, right, is give you the information and then you can fight for yourself.
I think that's what we've learned to have to do over the last couple of years. So many people watching wouldn't have thought that actually they need to be in the fight themselves, trusted those around them, and now they've picked up those tools and resources and fight. Let me finish off with the Freedom Summit that is coming up, and I am I will not be there in person, but I think you can also watch it online. And this is Saturday, September the 27th, from 9 to 5 in New Beginnings Church in Dallas. Tell us a little bit about this. Why should people go? And I think this will go out on the Monday, so it is the last day, I think, of early bird prices. But tell us a little bit about this and why people should actually come or watch online and learn from it.
People are very hungry for accurate medical information. The only way I know of to get that to you is to find the humans who are not bought and paid for by other interests, right? So this is what we do at Frontline Doctors. We have the best doctors who are independent thinkers. So we put them in front of you, and it's utterly fascinating. This is our second annual time we've done this. The first time it was a complete showstopper. Can you imagine 8 hours of information and nobody leaves? like it's wow. People are like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. It's so interesting. So we give you all the skinny. We give you all the very interesting medical details that pretty much doctors don't talk about. So it's going to be great.
Well, all the links are in the description. Dr. Simone Gold, it's an honor to have you on. And many of us have watched what you've done, standing up against medical tyranny, standing up against the deep state and the medical deep state. So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your book, but also Gold Care and also the upcoming conference. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.